Hey everyone, it's Scott Monkern again. Welcome again to one of my other reviews on games or unboxings, what I happen to feel like. Today we're going to talk about Crazy Karts. This is going to be a review. It is a wicked racing game for 3 to 8 players, 3 to 8 drivers, it actually says here. And it's a game by Charles Amir Perret, illustrated by Anastasia Melus. So that's it. Let's go ahead and get on with the review. So Crazy Karts is a racing game where you have teams of players, you play in teams of 2, where each of you have different powers with respect to your cars. So it's a racing game where each of you have a different piece, and it's a planning game. Now what's weird about it is you can't talk to each other about what you're going to do when you play the game. We'll talk more about that when we get into the game. But it's basically a racing game where you plan out your plays, then you have a resolution phase. And so that's the way it works. And 2 people typically control one cart. It has a hex map that you move along. The hex map has various obstacles on it that you move along. And the way you move is you set up all your planned strategies for the game or for the turn. Then you do a resolution phase where you see how those run out, and everybody does it simultaneously. So you'll have wacky stuff like, you did this and I did this, so our carts hit each other, or you and a teammate do something different, and so wacky stuff happens. So it's kind of a wacky racing game. Some people have described it as Mario Kart on a board. I've never played Mario Kart, so I don't have that kind of reference, but basically it's a concept of a kind of a wacky racing game with fantasy characters. So that's basically the game. It's designed to be run in two rounds. You do a qualifying round, and then you do a real race round. The difference being is in the real race, you get a special power if you won the qualifying round. A number of people have suggested just saying, look, either give a special power out randomly or give everybody out a special power and do that randomly or whatever, and then just do one race. I think they're right. Runs better. It's better as a short game with one race than it is with running 2 races. So let's go ahead and talk about the art. That's always the first thing I talk about after I talk about the game, is let's go ahead and talk about the art. This is wacky, wild, crazy art. There are a whole ton of components in this game. When I did an unboxing video, which you can go and take a look at, there are a ton of components with this game. And it's first of all, the components are really good and really solid. The artwork is very, very wacky. So this is not a serious game. If you're looking for a serious racing game, first of all, this is not the game for you. But I think the art is really cool. The obstacles have really good art on them. Here's some of the obstacle ones here. You can see here we've got really cool art. So the art is really cool. It's fun. It's wacky. It's zany. It definitely has that non-serious feel about them. You have player boards. Now, interestingly is that I think the artwork for the carts and stuff is very zany. I was kind of surprised. You get into the player mats. These aren't the player mats, but these are the kind of the player shields, because you hide from each other what you're doing. And so these are the player shields. They're actually kind of more serious. I was kind of surprised. You've also got stuff on the inside that says "winning is for mummies," which I think is kind of funny. But you see here, these are the mummies. There it is. Keep your bandages away from the spokes. But yeah, some of it's wacky, but I thought the player shields were a little more kind of serious in terms of their artwork than the rest of the stuff. But really, really good artwork. Definitely tied into the theme well. Pretty. I don't know whether I'd call it pretty. I would say it's appropriate for the game. It's a wacky, zany game with wacky, appropriate artwork. Best way to describe it. So let's go ahead and talk about the manual. That's always the next thing we like to talk about. So here's our manual. It's very short. It is 8 pages in very, very big print. Very, very big print. So the game is designed for kids 8 or higher, and it's really, really easy rules. It's not really simple. It's not like checkers level simple, but it's definitely pretty easy rules. And they did exactly what I always tell them to do, which is on the very first page you have the components list. So it tells you everything that should be in the box. Now they organize it a little strangely, but I think it's pretty good. They tell you, okay, you've got the bottle token, which is really nothing there other than that. Well, it's a really cool bottle. I'd use it. You don't even have a first player. You can't even use it as a first player token. No, they have a champagne bottle in there for no apparent reason. You have power-up tiles. You have the hex maps. It gave you lots of hex maps, so it's very cool. There were 4 sections in a starting track. You have obstacle tiles. you have upgrade tiles, and you have the damage cards, and then you have the player, essentially the equivalent of player mats and how they function. They are actually in pairs, one for each one, so they talk about those. And then you have the lone wolf. So it's got a components list, which is good. Then they've got the instructions. They are really well laid out. They've done a great job here of how they're laid out. They're really easy to read. I had no problems at all understanding how fundamentally how the game worked. I thought it was a little zany, to be perfectly honest, but it's a zany game. And they explain it well. They do, interestingly, have some advanced rules. It's really only one special power. They explain about that really, really well. They explain movement very well and how, because it's a racing game, obviously movement works. They talk about qualifying and then the official race, which I talked about before. Just do the official race, don't do the qualifier. They've got some advanced rules. All in all, solid rule book. No player aids this time. I'm not sure whether in this case you need them, to be perfectly honest. The game is so simple. The iconography is very straightforward in my opinion. The iconography mostly appears, you can see here, on these. We've got turn right, speed up, brake, power up, initiative. So I'm not sure whether you really need a player aid in this case. They're kind of built into the tool, into the components. But the manual, definitely excellent. So let's talk about the theme. I always tell people I really like good, solid themes. And this is definitely a well-integrated theme. In fact, without the theme, it would be a very dull, very confusing racing game. Definitely, we talked about the fact that it's kind of Mario Kart on a board game. Definitely a zany, wacky theme that's tightly integrated to it. Now, the rules are about racing. The theme is about racing. The wackiness definitely plays out the way you've got the players set up. We'll talk more about that and how that works. Definitely a really good, well-integrated theme into the game. Now, that being said, this may not be a game for everyone. I'm going to start by saying that, which is this is a zany, wacky racing game. I'm kind of reminded of years and years and years ago, there was a video game, not a console game, but an actual old-style video game, which was a fire truck where one guy drove the front and the other guy drove the rear and the can and everything. It had that kind of feel to it, which is there's a lot of discontinuity in the game. Excuse me, discontinuity is conflicting moves in the game between the two drivers. So thematically, I think it's really solid, but you've got to understand the theme is zany, wacky racing. If you're a competitive A-type, we must win kind of person, you know what? This may not be the best game for you, I'll be honest. It's about having fun. It's about crashing into the walls. It's about crashing into other players. That's what makes the game fun. If you're myopically focused on, I want to win, probably the theme here is not the best thing for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about playing the game. The game is played in teams. Each of your two members has a cart, and you have. It's basically on each round you have a planning round and then a movement round. And the planning round is where you sit down and figure out what your half of the cart is going to do, because each of you control half the cart. And then you have a resolution phase where everybody turns around and does what they're intending to do. Now, the way the planning works, the planning phase works, is each person in a cart is given a little player mat here, which has different things on it, which is there's like the lasso, speed up, shoot, and repair. This is one side. Let's see if I can find another side which is similar. Here's initiative, power up, brake, and turn. So these are really kind of the two you've got here. So one person gets this one person gets that one. So you put each of these behind your mat, and then on your turn you draw cards. You have a deck of essentially movement cards here, or better planning cards here. They have a number on them. They range from 1 to 3. And what you do is you draw cards each turn. Each of you two draw cards each turn based upon how fast you are going. So the faster you go, the fewer cards you get to actually do stuff with. Then the slower you go, you get more and more cards. Now what you do is you decide each of these cards, you can play cards on any of these. Now, each of these is going to have a different effect. Like there's a power-up which gives you a special ability. It's kind of like that special power-up thing on video games. We can put points there. When our total power-up hits 10, we get a special ability. We can play brake, turn, and charging. Now, what happened, that's basically to charge energy. There's some special features that have energy requirements. The card at the bottom says how much we're going to put on it. We can put multiple cards on one spot. So our two players do this. So you see here, interestingly, one guy controls the brake, and a different guy controls the accelerator. One guy controls turning left or right. The other guy controls shoot and repair. So each person controls a different thing. And this guy has a lasso, which is kind of an interesting special ability. That's the one that requires, it actually requires the 3 card to do. So you take your cards and you play them. Everybody gets them set out, and then you do resolution. And you move, you speed up, you slow down, you charge up. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do. And then if you hit obstacles, you suffer damage. If you hit other carts, you suffer damage. And then you go to the next round, and you go until someone crosses the finish line. So, very, very basic hex map racing game with some kind of interesting card-style mechanics to them. So that's kind of playing the game. Now, the thing about it is, and the thing which I am sure for serious gamers is going to very frustrate them a lot, is that you cannot talk to each other about what you're going to do. You have to be silent and guess what the other person is going to do. And that's where the zaniness falls in, which is that if I controlled all the actions, I could avoid the zaniness. But you will have situations where, oh, I sped up and you turned 3, or I turned and you slowed down, and so on and so forth. That's where the zaniness kind of falls out and comes into play. So that's the basic gameplay. Pretty easy to learn. The point cards and the spots on the board, probably the first time you play it, you'll have to figure out how that works. You have power-ups and you have energy, which give you special abilities, and you may have other special ability cards if you're playing with the advanced rules. But other than that, that's basically how the gameplay works. Oh, I mentioned this earlier, which is the game as it's written is designed to run 2 heats, a qualifying heat and then a final heat. Everybody I've talked to has always said, just play the final heat. That really is just more fun that way, and run multiple final heats. So the qualifying heat is kind of a waste. So what did I think about this game? This is definitely not what I'd classify one of the standard games that I would play with. Now, I'm not a heavy Euro gamer. I mean, I like Agricola, I love viticulture, but I would not classify myself as a heavy Euro gamer. On the other hand, and I like Ameritrash, whatever you choose to call it, like Smash Up and stuff like that. This definitely kind of falls outside the spectrum of the normal games that I play. It's wacky, it's zany. If you're playing this game to win, you're missing the point. The game is not designed to you play to win. The way the game is designed is you play to have fun. The fun is in the wackiness, the fun is in the crashes, the fun is in the weird stuff that happens. I suppose if you got really serious about the game and you were playing with the same partner all the time, you could try to get in sync with each other. I'm not convinced that's particularly what the whole point of the game is, but it's certainly an option that's available there. If you're into just a wacky afternoon kind of game, certainly it would be something I would consider. The rules do take a little bit of time to get used to. I certainly do not qualify this as a pickup game. It is not a game where you can lay it out and play it and teach people how to play in 5 minutes. It does take a good 15 minutes to explain people how it works. And honestly, normally you run once through a race, then people figure out how it works, and then you run again, and then people really get the thing. Now, then again, maybe that's why they suggest you doing a qualifying and a closing round. Honestly, just play it twice. Much more interesting that way. But really a good, solid game. Mechanics are good for what they are. Again, don't expect this to be a well-structured, organized, I'm going to plan out the next 20 turns kind of game. You're going to be lucky if you don't crash out of the gate. Well, not quite that bad, but there's a lot of crashing. It's a lot of fun. So, if you're looking for a game that's just fun to play, big social interaction where you get to tease each other about making stupid moves, great game. If you are interested in a game which is more serious and is more strategy based, there is some strategy here, but honestly, with the way it works, the strategy kind of falls by the wayside. So, not a big strategy game, honestly, to be perfectly honest. Okay, that's it. Definitely, I would buy it. If you like wacky, zany games, it should be on your shelf. If you are solely a big, heavy, serious, thick game player, you know what? Give this one a pass. There's some other stuff that are good, but for those of you that like that wacky zaniness, definitely a great game to play.